Welcome to the September 5th meeting of the Mobile City Planning Commission. I'd like to take a moment to review our general operating procedures. Our meeting is divided into two sessions, the public hearing session and the deliberation session. In the public hearing session, an application or group application on the agenda is called. The applicant makes his or her presentation. Commission members ask questions, if any. Members of the public make their comments. Only 4 people may speak for an agenda item, a project, and 4 against. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes, subject to questions by the commission. After 4 minutes, a loud beep will indicate 1 minute left to speak, and at this point, please summarize your comments. After all opposition speakers have finished, the applicant will be given time to respond. If you do intend to speak, please come to the podium, speak into the microphone, and give your name and address for our minutes. Please direct all comments to the commission only and not to the applicant or the audience. And please remember to speak directly into the microphone. On routine applications, the applicant may simply raise his or her hand if there are no objections to the staff recommendations. I will then announce that the applicant is in full agreement with those recommendations. If there are any questions, the applicant will be given an opportunity to respond. After hearing all applications, the commission will go into deliberation session. In the deliberation session, the commissioners discuss each application with input from the staff as necessary, but with no input from the audience. The commissioners then vote on each application, and the results of the voting can be learned from the planning department. If some issues arise in the deliberation session that were not addressed in the public hearing, the chairman has the discretion to either to allow additional comments pertaining to those issues in order to resolve them, or call for the application to be held over for discussion at a future meeting. Occasionally, one or more commission members may recuse themselves from discussing and voting on a given application. A recusal does not necessarily mean the member is directly involved with the application or the applicant. Depending upon circumstances, ethical rules may require a recusal when there is the slightest appearance of a conflict of interest. If a regular member recuses, the supernumerary will vote in their stead unless both supernumeraries are already voting due to absences. The Planning Commission makes final decisions subject to appeal on subdivisions, planning approvals, and plan unit developments, PUDD. The Planning Commission only makes recommendations on zoning applications, with the City Council making the final decision. Please turn off or silence all cell phones at this time. Commissioners and staff, please remember to turn on your microphones when speaking. Roll call. Myself here, Ms. Libby Latham, here. Ms. Jennifer Denson, here. Mr. Cart Blackwell, here. Ms. Shirley Sessions, here. Mr. Alan Cameron, here. Mr. Taylor Atchison, here. Mr. Matt Anderson, here. Mr. Nick Omberger, here. Mr. Don Embry, here. Mr. Jay Stubbs, here. We have a quorum. We'll begin on our meeting with the extensions. Item number 1. Mr. Cameron's recused on number 1. Bluffs at Cypress Creek Subdivision, Phase 2. It's requesting a 1-year extension of the subdivision application. Is the applicant present? Is there the extent more will be voted on in deliberation? Is there anyone here to speak for or against the extension? Thank you. Item number 2, 100 Long Street, Jaguar Cottages Subdivision. It's requesting a 1-year extension, and it's recommended that it be approved. Ms. Latham is recused. Is the applicant present? The agreement. Applicant is present and in agreement for the requesting the extension. Is there anyone here to speak for this? Is there anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Moving to our holdovers, item number 3, 1624 Spring Hill Avenue, Magnolia Manor subdivision, subdivision in PUD. Both are recommended for tentative approval.
I just want to talk on where I'm in agreement with the PUD and the subdivision. I was just going to talk on the rezoning. Had a couple other points that I wanted to make for hopefully a favorable recommendation.
We have your name and address.
David Schumer, Barton and Schumer Engineering, 3213 Midtown Park South. The owners had a pre-development meeting before I got involved on this project in January, and they were told that the variance was no longer valid and that they would either have to apply for a new variance or rezone to the B2 zoning. And at the conclusion of the meeting, the owners left with their architect with the understanding that the city's preferred option was to rezone for B2. And then that's why I started the PUD and rezoning process, and the subdivision is just logical because it's 2 lots. The site is, logically zoned business with a B2. There's B2 600 feet to the west, and then there's B2 or to the east. There's B2 to the west prior to another house fronting Spring Hill. So you have B2 in both directions on Spring Hill. The directly west use is the Ronald McDonald House, which is operating as essentially a hotel for families with patients at USA Hospital. A hotel requires a B3 or a B4 zone. And then the hospital can be any of the business zones. It just seems like this logically would fit better for a B2 than to hold an R1 use variance. They asked this asked for overnight guests. They're not going to have a permanent staff at this. If they ever did like an Airbnb, or not an Airbnb, like a bed and breakfast, it would be for somebody probably that's getting married to want to stay the Friday night, the Thursday night leading up to the wedding. It's not going to be used as a hotel or have a permanent staff with a commercial kitchen or anything like that. It would just be in part with the use. And they're willing to add use restrictions so that it doesn't become any undesirable use. And then the capacity may be limited even further by the fire code. I thought when we were here last month that the parking was the main concern, and I did not realize that they had other concerns about the use or the zoning. I thought it was mostly parking and what was going on upstairs. So I was surprised when we got the recommended for denial, or recommendation of denial. So, I mean, the closest resident is almost half a mile to the east that fronts on Spring Hill. Most of the residents either are off of a back street, and then the adjacent residence to the east is owned by USA and has multiple addresses. So it's not being used as a residence either. So there's no reason for this to be required to be zoned R1. It was zoned R1 probably in the 50s when zoning came into effect, and there's been a substantial change in the area since then that would allow this to be rezoned. If anybody has any questions.
I have a question for staff. What is the reason for the denial of the rezoning, the suggestion for denial of rezoning? I didn't see an explanation.
Basically, if you extend into the distances that Mr. Schumer's referring to, you'll see B2. However, in the immediate vicinity, it's primarily zoned B1 and single and multifamily. There is no B2 in the immediate area. He's referenced possibly self-restricting certain uses, including B&B, open to the public beyond those that are using the facility for receptions and so forth. We do not have a copy of, our signed voluntary use restriction forms. We would need things of that nature if the commission is looking at going down the route of recommending B2 subject to any conditions. But as you can see, there is no B2 in the immediate area.
This is an existing reception hall, right? We aren't suggesting building another building.
No, this is,
It's a historic-
the owner currently lives there, and it was in 1997 approved to act reception hall, and I'm not sure if it ever was. It may have been in at some point, and then when he bought it, he moved in, and he's just wanting to turn it back into a reception hall. I mean, it fits the use. If you zoomed out from the zoning, you know, she said there's not directly adjacent, there's no other B2s, but there's also there's no other residences that front Spring Hill. I mean, it's a major artery in the city, which you wouldn't expect to have a residence on. But the residentially zoned property to the east is owned by South, and you can see that there's multiple addresses. And, you know, I don't know what their use is, but I don't think it's a residence. You know, to the west is Ronald McDonald House, which is a hotel, which
Mr. Chairman.
operates as B4.
So you indicated earlier that there was a variance to begin with, and the staff recommended that you pursue a zoning change.
When the owner, I was not at the pre-development meeting. When the owners went to the pre-development meeting, they were told that since it wasn't currently operating, or that they had stopped operating it as a reception hall, that the variance was no longer valid. And they said you'd either back to another use variance or rezone. And at the time, the rezoning to be in compliance is better than having variance. Right before our previous meeting for the Planning Commission, we were notified that the variance is still valid. And they would have probably chosen that route at that time.
So
But now
if the variance is still valid,
The variance as approved in the 90s is still valid, subject to the conditions and the configuration approved in the 90s. Any expansion beyond that scope would require another variance or rezoning.
okay, so really what we need is a voluntary use restriction form.
If
And
the commission's looking to approve and wants those conditions as offered, yes, sir, that would be required.
Okay, great, thanks.
And I apologize, I haven't worked on a rezoning with volunteer use restrictions. I didn't realize there was a form. Otherwise, we would have completed that paperwork.
Because it's within the application right here, correct?
Well, in the staff report, it states that there's a form. But I don't have a copy. And the owners will be happy to fill out and add the use restrictions listed in the narrative.
You know, the other thing is, it's not just, we can't just think about the residences that front onto Spring Hill. We have to think about, I mean, you have to kind of look at it as a radius. There are other homes within a couple hundred feet of the property line.
The homes to the east, there's a large wooded buffer with a large drainage easement that can't be
Yeah,
affected.
but be that as it may, if you had an unrestricted usage of.
Oh, no,
B2
we have
zoning,
no
you know.
intention to, we were fine with the
But
restrictions.
But it's not just about your intent, it's also, we have to think about the future as well.
Oh,
So-
I understand, if it burns down or something, whatever comes there in the future. But yeah, but they're not, the restrictions listed on the narrative, the owner has no issue filling out any paperwork that's required.
Just for clarification from staff, I mean, it's surrounded by B1, it's currently zoned R1. If the applicant was requesting B1 zoning, staff would not have an issue with that, correct?
With an expansion of B1, we would likely be recommending approval.
Okay, so that being the case, what is it that you're trying to do at this location that would prevent you from falling under the B1 category?
No.
Serve alcohol. It's intended for a reception hall would have weddings and celebrations that most people around here. You can't have that in a B1.
Right, okay.
Can you do the things that you want to do under the zoning, or the Board of Advisor, the variance, that's the word I'm looking for, under the current variance that's still in effect? Can you do what your plans are?
We would have to revise the site plan to match that plan, and then the difference between the use variance and the zoning is if they wanted to make any changes. Now, the post site plan specific, but we're working with the future assumption that the the zoning ordinance is going to change in the near future, they're no longer going to require multiple buildings to have a PUD, and so any future modifications, if it's under the variance, it would be still tied to that site plan. But it's not clear to me yet exactly what would happen to PUDs that are due to multiple buildings when the new zoning ordinance goes into effect that may not require a multiple building PUD.
Do you have any comments about that, Mrs. Pappas?
Can you repeat
Oh,
that?
or do you have any comments or response to that?
The only thing I believe I can clarify, and Mr. Schumer did quite well, the variance is in effect. He is restricted to the site as it currently exists under that variance. Any changes to the site or the scope of operation, including the overnight accommodations, would have to go back to the variance board.
Thank you.
It just provides more flexibility to be zoned, even with the restrictions, because they have no intent to do any of those other uses.
So what's our best path forward? I mean, the voluntary use restrictions, I mean, that's something that the applicant would have to get to staff. Is it better to hold it over to the next meeting, or?
I would say yes. That way the commission has the document to review as part of their application.
You're okay with a holdover?
Yes.
And that would be to, if we're simply looking for that form, that could be simply to the next meeting, which is September 19th, and we've emailed the form to Mr. Schumer.
Okay.
I thought I had all of the forms.
I have one additional question.
Okay.
Pertaining to your parking. Are you going to have overnight accommodations there, or just sometimes? Or-
It would be limited. They don't want to restrict the overnight, but it's not going to be a hotel or a bed and breakfast, I don't believe, where they're going to have a staff and they're going to lease out the rooms individually. I think the idea would be if the bride is going to get married, that she may come and stay with either her brides or her parents or, some family that's in town, and they can stay there for the weekend.
So this question, I guess, is for traffic. Does that change where requirements are under their submittal? I mean,
No, ma'am. Since it's a subsidiary use of the property, it's the overall event planning that would be a bigger traffic driver.
okay, thank you. I just didn't want you to come back one more time and then have more questions.
Ms.
Thank
Latham,
you.
Ms. Latham, one clarification, unless there's some type of self-restricting condition placed on the applicant to that effect, with an Airbnb, the overnight accommodations, if they become open to others, we wouldn't have the ability to restrict that unless they self-restrict.
Okay.
Yeah, that would definitely, I can get with you on the actual verbiage on how to, because they would like, someone to be able to come on a Thursday, stay through the weekend. Okay.
Yeah, just be as comprehensive as you can on your voluntary use restrictions. That way we won't have to spend a lot of time on it at the next meeting. So.
Any other questions by commissioners? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? New subdivision applications, item number 4, Paradise Garden subdivision, recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Yes. Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 5, Audubon Drive subdivision, Dawkins Addition 2, 4145 Audubon Drive East, recommended for tentative approval. Applicants present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Item number 6, 4251 Alden Drive, Sheldon Place subdivision, recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Yes. Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Item number 7, Winfield subdivision, 7236 Wynn Court, recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
The staff needs to clarify something on condition number 1. We were able to locate an approved extension for the balance of the property. So condition for the rest of this, there is a tentative approval for Winfield subdivision, Unit 5, Addition 2. So staff would recommend changing condition number 1 to state revision of the plat to place a note stating that the remainder of the tax parcel is a future development associated with Winfield subdivision, Unit 5, Addition 2.
Okay, and you'll repeat that at the proper time?
Yes, sir, I will.
Thank you. Anyone else here to for this? Anyone here to speak against?
Excuse me a minute. Mr. Austin, have you seen that revision that Ms. Pappas just read out loud? Do you need to see it in writing?
Yes, I have. That's okay.
Great, thank you.
Item number 8, Perry Place subdivision, 152 and 156 South McGregor Avenue, recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Applicant present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 9, 211 and 213 Childry Drive, Childry Estate subdivision, recommended for approval. Is the applicant present? Agreement, applicant is present and in agreement with staff recommendations. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against?
Scott Biggett, 214 Childry Drive. I'm opposed to this specific to the addition of a driveway on the Childry side of the property. When we live across the street, when we purchased the property there, the driveway access was on the back of the lot, on the side, consistent with the rest of the neighborhood. I feel like adding a driveway to the Childry Drive side negatively impact the aesthetics, possibly the property values, and increase traffic in the neighborhood. That's the only problem I have with this division.
Could you describe to us again exactly there are no driveways on the Childry side?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, in the neighborhood in general, Rochester as well. Most of the driveways are on the side of the property or in the back, and the existing driveway is on the back. That accesses both Lot 1 and Lot 2 of the subdivision. And I don't see a driveway in this drawing, but I believe the plan is to cut a driveway on the front. I would be opposed to that.
The drawing shows the driveway on the backside coming on Rochester. Is that not
So,
Mr. Chairman, there is an existing driveway coming off Rochester here. There's also, here. There's also a curb cut and a drive here. And this approval, they would have the ability for additional curb cuts to be provided if approved by traffic engineering, including the potential for a curb cut directly from 1 to Childry Drive. Right now, their access is via Rochester.
But the applicant's not asking for additional curb cuts. You're saying that right drive on Childry is existing?
I'm sorry.
The curb cut on Childry to Lot 2, you're saying, is existing?
Based on the plat, correct, that is correct, based on what they've submitted, and that would be in line with the previous approval that allowed it.
Ms. Pappas, I want to make one minor correction. The rock drive shown on there was a construction driveway that was allowed just through a right-of-way permit for the construction of the building.
Okay.
And without the removal of the note that only allowed access for both lots onto Rochester, that driveway would have to be removed as part, at the completion of the construction.
Okay.
Any other questions by commissioners? Just for clarity, currently, the driveway to Childress is not proposed as of right now, but it could be added if they wanted to.
Correct. As recommended, the number of driveways and their location and design would strictly be approved by traffic engineering.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions by commissioners? The applicant has the opportunity to respond.
Hey, I'm Jake Parker. I'm the actual owner of Lot 2. I'll just add the clarification that the current rock drive we put in for a construction entrance, our intent would be to turn that into a permanent drive that would not be our primary driveway. Our primary entrance is in the rear. The garages are on the rear of the residence off of Rochester. But our preference would be to have the additional curb cut, for guest parking. I mean, it's a subdivision, but there is a precedent that's been set in the subdivision. I'd say a vast majority of the houses have a circular drive in the front to try to reduce on-street parking. So it wouldn't be that there's cars parked in the front drive. It's strictly for, a visitor's, was our intent. Since we were having to redo the subdivision, I talked with my neighbor, and of course, right now his plan is to access lot through the shared drive. But it would be for, if resale value, if somebody has a concern over a shared drive, they'd be able to add one in the future. So, I guess what I'd like to highlight, there's a precedent for two curb cuts in the neighborhood to actually eliminate street parking. Unfortunately, Childry is used as quite a cut-through. So that was our thought, was to minimize obstructions to traffic and on-street parking overnight or for visitors.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions by commissioners?
Clarification from staff. So the removal of the rock drive is not required under this application.
As recommended, that is correct.
Okay.
Any other questions by commissioners? Thank you. New plan unit development applications, item number 10, Russell Investments LLC, 5500 Plantation Road, recommended for approval. Is applicant present?
I'm Patrick Liddell with 3 Engineering. We request this be held over to next month to allow us to relocate the building. Since we've submitted an application, they wanted to relocate the building.
October 3rd?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Applicant has requested holdover until October 4th. 3rd. to probably be granted at such time. You will have the opportunity to speak for or against it, but you do have that right at this time as well. Is there anybody else here to speak for this? Is there anybody here to speak against? Thank you. New planning approval applications, item number 11, First National Bank and Trust, 5901, 05, and 09 Airport Boulevard. Ms. Latham is recused. Recommended for tentative approval. Applicant present. In agreement with staff recommendations. Applicant is present and in agreement with staff recommendations. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 12, 618 Azalea Road, McKimmey Place Incorporated. It's recommended for approval. Is the applicant present? In agreement with staff recommendations. Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against?
Good afternoon. My name is Jordan Garrett. I'm an attorney with Starnes Davis Flory here in Mobile. I'm here today on behalf of the landowner at 620 Azalea Road, which, based on my review today, is immediately behind the 618 property. Our first request of the commission is to at least hold this over. My client is out of town and only received notice of this hearing Tuesday from his tenant, who is at the 620 Azalea Road property with a picture of the sign. He is in New York and would like to be here. It would also allow more time for him and I to learn what the applicant is seeking to do at this property. But he's already received complaints from his current tenant. When he purchased this property approximately 6 to 7 years ago, it was professional offices. That's what he used it for. If they to give him notice at the P.O. box, which is listed for this residence, it's located in Fairhope. His office checks it every day, and he confirms with me today that he has not received it. And while he doesn't, oppose the mission of McKimmey Place, he would not have purchased this property knowing that a shelter was there or could be there. His current tenants, as I mentioned, also expressed some reservation, and that necessarily leads to some issues for the value of it as an owner and as a lessor. So we would ask that you vote no, but at a minimum, please hold over so that the property owner can gain more information and be here before y'all.
Okay, thank you. Any questions by commissioners? Thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak against?
Mr. Chairman, just to bring to the note of the commission, you probably all have a packet of information that was sent via.
I see 3 letters, one from a Ms. Twilley, one from a Mrs. McAdams, and one from a Mr. Gray. Yeah, so there's 3 letters. Okay.
The owner has an opportunity to respond.
Thank you, Commission. My name's Ben Kinnemer. I am the board president and also acting executive director for McKimmey Place at this time. So I wanted to try to put some of the things at ease around this piece of property and utilization and usage. So currently, McKimmey operates in 2 facilities, a day shelter and a night shelter. And we serve roughly 55 guests during the day and about 35 guests at night. We have roughly about 30% of our population or guests work during the day. And so some of the concerns around the property itself, one, we are planning on putting over $150,000 into the property to bring up to code. In addition to that, we will have, the way we operate currently and the way we'll operate this facility is it will be an emergency shelter in which a guest will be taken in. We will have pickup points. We currently have a bus that we will pick up multiple points around the city that we will drop off to facilities that our populace is currently being served. With this facility, it'll allow us to really control our outcomes and the population itself that we serve. We all have responsibility as a community to the guests that we serve, and ours will be better served with this facility. There will be a fence along the courtyard in the back. That will be our outside piece of the property. We will not have any loitering of our guests around the property itself. We'll have 2 control points going in and out of the building, one in the back and then one in the side. The one in the back will be locked, but will be emergency use only for exit. And it also will be our wheelchair access. We serve roughly, our average age population is roughly 58 years old currently. There are some outliers, but when we know that this is a topic that can be somewhat contentious, but from our standpoint, we're making an investment in the city. We're making an investment in our guests, for our guests. We're investing in this property because we want to improve the value of this piece of property, and our goal is to own and purchase this facility. We'll have an ambulatory room, which will allow our guests to have access to health care. We'll have classrooms, which we don't have that right now. We also don't have access to classrooms. So that will be, the guests themselves will enter into a 6-month program, and it will allow for them to have a sustainability training, because it takes about 6 months for us to get a guest house. We've roughly housed 50 ladies. Is it 50? 50 ladies so far, and 60? Okay, 60 ladies. Sorry, I got my statistic wrong. 60 ladies this year over the past 6 months, which is, that number has exceeded all we've done in the past 9 years, or 10 years of existence. So I will take any questions or comments from the commission.
Yeah, so one of the letters we received was from Miss Carolyn Twilley, who lives at his Trail Court, which is kind of behind the property. What is you mentioned a fence on the back end of the property. What's that going to be like?
So the fence, so the facility itself is kind of shaped like a U, if you will. As you can kind of see there, the courtyard is between the 2 sides of the building, and there will be a fence running across there. The other thing I would say is there actually is the up above us actually got a cut through in which you see foot traffic go across there every day. That's not currently on our property, or we would fence that off. Mm-hmm. But our plan is to control our population with that, having outside access through the courtyard.
Yeah. So the other thing is that, so Ms. Twilley, she didn't address that directly. I mean, she mentioned a concern about having the facility close to residential area, but also mentioned, being concerned that it wouldn't be a safe environment for the ladies. Could you kind of describe what your protocols are around that to keep your residents safe?
Absolutely. So currently, I said we serve in 2 facilities, and we have a day shelter that we bus guests from a night shelter. And to be honest, we keep our locations secretive because of the population that we serve and the guests that sometimes experience abuse and whatever else. So having a public hearing around this facility, to be honest, is a little bit outside of the norms of how we operate. As far as actually the control around our guests, and so a couple of things. So we have 13 staff members. We'll have currently the way we operate, we have 2 staff members at the building or at the location at all times. We have a caseworker that also is the operations manager of our shelter that will be on staff with most likely 2 additional staff members during the day, and then we will continue our path forward with two staff members at night, and probably go to some type of security or police. We'll have, we have in the budget for cameras that will allow us to monitor at least the perimeter of our building, and then for the reasons we won't, or I should say personal space, we won't have it in all places, but most public places in the building we will have access to from camera standpoint. The other thing I would say, how we serve our guests. That was kind of what you were kind of indicating. So we take guests off the street, but most of the time it's not somebody walking down the street into our building. Most of the time it comes from either a healthcare facility, it comes from a mental health or a hospital that's that's putting the ladies, and they need to go to permanent residence. So we take those ladies in. We do only unaccompanied women, so we don't have children at this facility, by the way, and we don't have men. So we're only serving a certain population. Addition to how we serve our guests, we provide 3 square meals. We provide a warm bed. We provide a place for them to do laundry, and we provide a place for them to get clean, and hygiene is very important to how we serve. There will be check-ins and sign-ins and sign-outs, how we currently do now. So if somebody needs to go somewhere, they sign in, they are either given a bus pass, or we take them to that location. And a lot of times with this building, we will actually be able to bring those caregivers or those that are serving our guests in-house. We can't currently do that now, so we actually have to bring our guests to the location. Does that answer your question?
How does this location differ from your other locations?
Greatly. It's an amazing facility that, to be honest, we did a tremendous amount of due diligence on this building. The landlord or the property owner let us sit on this building in due diligence for a year and a half. The current facility that we play, the night shelter, was produced 12 years ago, and how McKimmey started was 10 people got together, and basically a lady froze to death, and they said never again. And so by doing that, they found a facility, which I'm not going to name, but it's a 2-story building. Those that are indigent or cannot go up the stairs sleep on cots on the bottom floor. And then we have roughly 40 beds upstairs that we sleep at night. We then bud about 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, wake up about 5. That allows them to get their things to go, and if they got to go to work, they obviously can drive themselves, so they provide a bus pass. Or in the other case, the ladies that don't have a current job or employment, we will actually take them to our day shelter. And our day shelter is at another location that's a big room, and then we have 2 offices that we use to serve as case management. And that's currently, and then we bus back in the evening to start the process all over again. This is one location, one secure location that helps us provide inflow, helps us to guard our guests and allow them to be stable, to have a place where they can grow and flourish, and that can ultimately get sustained again so that they can be a productive person in society if they haven't been already.
Any other questions by commissioners?
Just for the record, staff, could you address the concern about notice, that when the notice was sent out to all the adjoining property owners?
The letters were date stamped on August 16th, so that would have gone out approximately 15 days ago, and the one that we had returned back to our department was returned on August 20th. But the abutting property owner that was referenced earlier was noticed to their P.O. Box in Fairhope.
Any other questions by commissioners? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Moving to new sidewalk waiver applications, item number 13, Val Seafood, 5208 Mobile South Street. The waiver is recommended for denial.
Yes, I'm Val Hammond with Royal Lagoon Seafood. We purchased a lot adjacent to us to expand our business. And it's the last lot on our street and they're requiring us to have a sidewalk. We're asking for a waiver. We would be the only lot on this street with a sidewalk, and the closest sidewalk to our property is over a mile away. And I know that you have a 2011 Complete Street mission, but I think a precedent was set when our neighbor across the street for warehousing has built since that 2011, and then basically a 100-acre development with no sidewalks. So it just seems like I'm being singled out as a little guy and required a waste of money. So I'm just asking for a waiver for the sidewalk. It really makes no sense.
Could you clarify for us, we see a picture here of your
Yes,
property.
sir.
You said
Yeah, I have the building on the left, and I purchased the lot on the right side of it. So we're expanding right now.
So this is the end of the street here?
Well, it's further down. I think you're looking at the food bank by your thumb. That's the food bank. I'm right next food bank, and then we bought the lot next to us.
Okay.
And we're in the construction phase now. But to have one sidewalk in the whole warehouse complex really doesn't make a lot of sense. They've said that, for future redevelopment, but not in our lifetime.
Which property was the one that you said was granted a sidewalk waiver?
Across the street, Bassford Warehousing was built since 2011 with no sidewalks.
Staff, y'all have any records handy of that sidewalk waiver? Okay.
So the warehouses you're talking about are the ones directly across the
Yeah, directly across the street from it. It's over a 100-acre development.
Yeah.
It would have been much easier. It would have made a lot of sense if they had sidewalks, and I'd be happy. And if I could reach some agreement where if you put 25% of sidewalks in there, I can pay for it then, that's fine. But it just seems like for the next 25 years, I'm going to be singled out with a little sidewalk that goes nowhere.
Yeah, I
And
understand.
a waste of good money I'd like to use somewhere else.
You're talking about roughly, I guess, 260 linear feet of sidewalk?
Yeah, I think so. 2 lots, both of those lots together.
And you said 100 acre twice, you mean 100,000
Across the street,
feet?
yeah, there's a 100-acre development. That warehouse across the street is well over a 100-acre development.
100,000 square feet.
What's that?
100 acres?
100 acres, yeah. Warehouses and parking lots, but no sidewalks. So I'm just curious why I'm being singled out.
I would like to state that I think a lot of this subdivision or a lot of this development was developed prior to its annexation into the city limits. And so I don't recall having a sidewalk waiver here along Mobile South Street unless it's for the Alabama Power yard that is going to be at the terminus of the road. I do recall that on Biscuits Parkway, closer to Kooyman Road, we did require some sidewalks for the developments up by Kooyman Road. So there have not been that many applications coming through the Planning Commission for this overall commercial area, but where there have been some, we have required sidewalks typically, so.
Could I say there's only 3 vacant lots left in our whole subdivision, so the chance of getting sidewalks. And the sidewalk that he's mentioned is on the corner, well over a mile away.
Any other questions by commissioners? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone to speak against? Thank you. New group applications. Item number 14, Spring Hill Realty Subdivision, 3101, 105, and 109, Commerce Court East. Ms. Latham is recused. Recommended for tentative approval. Applicant present.
William Latta, Clark Ear Latham, 3901 Spring Hill Avenue. We're generally in agreement with the recommendations. We would like to remove comments D and M from the engineering comments. These refer to a drainage easement that is referenced on the current subdivision plat. and the vacation process. This is a private drainage easement, and it contains private water, doesn't contain city water, and thus through the subdivision, the current subdivision application, we think it would be properly vacated and moved.
That's D and M.
I haven't talked to city engineering about this particular application, but we have had this discussion recently on another site where there's this easement, from what I've been told, and Mr. Latta can correct us or confirm this easement is not tied to any city water drainage. It's a complete private easement just serving this property. So legally, the city has no interest in this easement, and thus a vacation process is not necessary. We have in the past allowed these private easements to be vacated, or in this particular instance, they're relocating it. They're not doing away with it. They're relocating it just by recording a new plat over the existing plat. So unless engineering department disagrees, I think we can remove that condition and just allow them to, we can allow the vacation to be done by the recording of a new plat.
Yeah, there's no disagreement there, and I think what maybe distinguishes this one between another one that we dealt with recently is that where it was in a succession, it was a
Correct.
continuous succession of drainage easements that was, if it got vacated, then it would affect the adjacent neighbors. This is kind of at the very upper end of the drainage, so it's really only applying to this particular property, so that there's no objection from engineering.
Okay,
And that's
thank you.
provided there's no legal statutory requirement.
No,
to-
there's none, because the city legal interest, property interest in this easement.
All right, thank you.
So that was item D and M.
Correct.
And all the other requirements under subdivision were agreeable.
We're good.
Any other questions by commissioners? Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 15, Leeton Village, east terminus of Leeton Place. Recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement.
Rick Twilley, 3015 River to Sheen. Yeah, this was going to, under item number 6I, it was proposed showing as a private road, and it is actually a public. I believe staff's aware of all that.
Yes, we could just delete the word private from item I. That would be sufficient.
All right, any other questions?
Any other questions from commissioners? Thank you, sir. Anyone else here to speak for this? Any here to speak against? Thank you. Item number 16, 65 Mobile Street. UMS Wright Corporation is recommended for tentative approval. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with staff recommendations? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this? Anyone here to speak against? Thank you. That closes the public deliberation session. Public hearing session. We'll now enter deliberations. Moving to item number 1, which is recommended. They're requesting a 1-year extension. It's recommended for that. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Items approved. Your extension approved. Item number 2, Jaguar Cottages subdivision, recommended for a 1-year extension. Ms. Latham is recused. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. 1-year extension granted. Holders, item number 3. 1624 Spring Hill Avenue. Applicant is okay with holdover to September 19th. I'll make the motion.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded for a holdover until September 19th. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Applicant is held over till the September 19th meeting. New subdivision applications. Item number 4, 1503 and 1529 Woodridge Road, recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 5, 4145 Audubon Drive East, recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
I move we approve, subject to staff recommendations.
Second.
Properly moved and second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 6, 4251 Alden Drive, Sheldon Place subdivision, recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 7, 7236 Wingate Court, Winfield subdivision. It's recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendations, changing item number 1 to
A revision of the plat to replace a note on the final plat stating that the remainder of tax parcel R023336 dot is part of future development associated with Winfield Subdivision Unit 5.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 8, 152 and 156 South McGregor Avenue, Perry Place subdivisions, recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Properly and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Item passes. Item number 9, 211 and 213 Childry Drive, recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
Before I make a motion, I'd like to address the concern about driveway access that is addressed in item number 7. Placement of a note on the final plat stating the following traffic and engineering comments. So that's, engineering will have to approve all future driveways. So I move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Item passes. New plan unit subdivisions. Item number 10, 5500 Plantation Road. Applicant has requested holdover until October 3rd. I'll make the motion.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Items held over to October 3rd meeting. New planning approval applications, item number 11, 5901, 905, and 909 Airport Boulevard, First National Bank and Trust. Ms. Latham is recused. It's recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendations, findings of fact number 3.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item number 12, 618 Azalea Road, McKinney Place Incorporated. It's recommended for tentative approval. Is there motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'm confused, and there might be some other confusion by other people. If I could get Mary Beth to explain to us this cut-through on the adjoining property was mentioned by Ms. Twilley in her letter. Apparently, this church has this access all the way from Cottage Hill to Azalea, but based on the site plan that's in the packet, which is the last page of the staff report, it shows that driveway going on this property, it may be being a joint access to Azalea. Is that, I mean, is there a paved access all the way to Azalea now, do we know? And are they going to use this jointly? Because this site plan shows at least one, if not, well, two curb cuts, if you will, or cut-throughs from this site to the adjoining site.
The only access I'm aware of is towards the south. I got the, well, let me look at this. Because it sounded like it was foot traffic, or it was a dirt trail. Is it not a dirt trail?
Yeah,
It was paved
she
access.
was mentioning in her letter is there's a spot in the fence on the back side of that Apostolic Church of God, or it's called something different now, but it used to be called the Apostolic Church of God. There's a gap in their fence, and there's foot traffic that goes through that fence sometimes. Onto the, I guess that parcel, is that 620? I don't have the address on this
But
map.
just by looking at the site plan that's in our packet, with that cut-through from McKimmy's parking lot to that driveway on the church's property, it looks like that the church might have a right to say, hey, we've got access that way. And I certainly don't want that to be part of any approval if it isn't approved.
My understanding was a fence was to be put up around the perimeter of the property to make it secure. I don't know if that's...
Okay. It's just confusing based on this site plan. See there, that shows access from here to there, two-way access in here. But it has arrows going both ways on that parking lot. So if we get to that point, if you do decide to approve this, I would ask that another condition be added, that there be, that the property to the south, or whatever that is, be denied access to this parking lot, because the site plan shows it. Or yeah, with that closed off, yeah.
You know, if a fence were to go up, perimeter fence, that would suffice.
True, but this site plan, if it's approved like this and reported like this, gives the church next door
Right.
possibly some lights, because it shows a curb cut with arrows going both ways on what's been submitted.
So to cover our
Sure,
bases,
McKinney does not want.
right, to cover our bases legal, we just need to word it so that it says that no access granted from the church driveway.
Are we sure there's no ingress and egress easements, maybe between the parcels as well? Do we know?
In here. You see what I'm talking about?
Plat would be helpful.
That's every impression I got. I got a foot trail.
The fence is there.
There's no, they don't want cross-access. So if y'all get to that point and approve it, let's include that in the conditions.
It's the southern curb cut to the common access drive.
Thank you.
All right.
Sorry for that.
Well, I'll move to approve the application based on staff recommendations, findings of facts A, B, and C, adding in the requirement for no access from the church property to the, I guess that's the southeast corner. Is that the best way to word that from a legal perspective? Okay.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposes? Item passes. New sidewalk waiver applications. Item number 13, Val Seafood. It's recommended to deny the sidewalk waiver. Is there a motion?
I'm always inclined to deny these waivers, especially when staff recommends denial, but I also want us to be consistent in what we're requiring. So there's no recollection, no records that we have available right now regarding the 100-acre parcel across the street and what we allow that out there. Oh.
It's 100,000 square feet.
Oh, okay, well, that's a lot of land right there in that area.
And it appears it may have been developed prior to annexation.
I think that's
Okay,
correct.
so therefore, a sidewalk would not have been required at that
At the time of construction.
But I would also volunteer in a dead-end industrial subdivision, if we're creating sidewalks, where we're asking, can people walk to? I mean, I don't, sometimes these things make a lot of sense, I'm all for sidewalks, but I just don't see it in a dead-end industrial location without any other sidewalks. And even if there were, where are we asking people to walk?
I think the argument can be made that we've got foot traffic from the businesses up and down the road. And again, I see what you're saying, I agree with what you're saying, but I also think that we need to try to be as consistent as possible with requiring our sidewalks and being firm with that, so.
The tough challenge with this one, let me add in, if sidewalks were to be constructed, it would be a city capital project, to which we would coordinate with a council member, and they would, because of the size of this neighborhood, or this commercial park, it'd probably be upwards of $500,000. And I can tell you the city council members are, this would be one of the last places in the world. Yep. This would be one of the last places in the world they would be funding sidewalks. They've got a whole lot of residential places to go to it, so it's tough for us to be consistent. I think we would probably all like a scenario where, again, I'll say the word again, sidewalk bank or the words.
I like that word.
Mechanism to do it, because there could become a point in time, I think we'd all like to see it, where even in some of these commercial parks, you would install a facility, maybe somebody at lunchtime wants to get out and walk.
But wouldn't it be, even if they came in and not necessarily redeveloped, they had a PUD where they add buildings to the property, wouldn't a sidewalk be required at that point in time?
Well, that's what's happening now.
Right.
Well, the sidewalk requirement is associated with the subdivision regulations.
Right.
And that's what's triggering it in this case.
So I hate to be the anti-sidewalk guy. I feel like I'm always the anti-sidewalk guy. But, I mean, the guy has a valid point. He's a relatively small business, and he would be the only dude with a sidewalk. And a lot of this stuff is not going to get redeveloped anytime soon. I mean, it's just industrial crap that's going to be there forever. So it's kind of exactly what Nick said. If there's a sea change at some point in the future where, it makes sense to have, where it makes sense, or if there's increasing foot traffic on its own, that there might be a city capital project there. But to do this patchwork thing it's not immediately business friendly, and it doesn't have any benefit to the citizens either. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I'll agree with that, and I'll go ahead and make the motion to deny the sidewalk requirement, or approve the waiver of denial.
So, to approve the waiver?
Yeah, approve the waiver.
I'll second.
Discussion, just for clarification, and again, I'm not opposed to denying, to allowing the waiver. But in the past, historically, we've always denied them based on topographical issues with not being able to feasibly construct sidewalks. So if we're going to change our measurement we use for allowing sidewalk waivers, then we just need to be mindful of that.
I believe we have denied them,
We have
approved
allowed.
the waivers in industrial areas before, where it's hard to argue a lot of walkability will naturally occur regardless whether there's sidewalks or not.
And I would add that is, the nature of the beast, each of these has to be considered on a case-by-case basis. That's why they're coming to us for a vote.
Yeah.
And I think the issue is more that it's of the industrial neighborhood as opposed to there not being other sidewalks around it, because we have certainly required sidewalks in streets and areas where there have been no other sidewalks, but I think the industrial nature of this area, I think what Mr. Amberger was talking about with the capital projects, I think those are very valid reasons that are being expressed to allow to require a sidewalk.
I agree, even though I love sidewalks, but this one, I've been down in this area before. This is where the food bank is, and there's no sidewalks at all.
I think allowing the sidewalk waiver to be allowed would still be consistent with what this planning commission has done over the past several years in relationship to sidewalks.
But with that being said, I think we do need to figure out the sidewalk bank thing that Nick keeps talking about. He keeps saying the same thing over and over again. It gets stuck in your head.
So I move to approve the sidewalk.
Already has been.
It's already a
I'm
motion.
sorry. I forgot the discussion.
You were just stuck in discussion.
Call for the vote.
All in favor of the waiver of the sidewalk?
Aye.
Against?
Because it's
Sidewalk is denied.
No,
No.
it's not.
Wait.
No.
The application
The
is
wa-
approved.
the waiver is approved.
We approved the waiver.
Item number 14, new applications. Ms. Latham is recused, 3101, 3105, 3109 Commerce Court East. It's recommended for tentative approval, subdivision PUD.
Can we take them separately, please?
Take them separately. Part A, subdivision. Is there a motion?
Move to approve subdivision based on staff recommendation, removing item D as in David and M as in Mike.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Part A passes. Part B for the PUDs, recommended for tentative approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on recommendations, findings of facts, C and D.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item 15, east terminus of Leeton Place, Leeton Village, subdivision and PUD, both recommended for approval. We can take them separately. Item 8, subdivision, recommended approval. Is there a motion? Properly moved and seconded.
We need to remove.
With editing, so moved, but removing the word private in item number 6.
6I.
6I.
Is that the only spot that needs to be?
Is there any discussion? All in favor of approval with the removal of private in item 6I?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item A passes. Part B, the PUD, recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
Move to approve based on staff recommendations, findings of facts, B and C.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Item passes. Item number 1665, Mobile Street, recommended for approval for PUD and planning approval. Take as one. Is there a motion? Are we accepting all findings of facts?
This is on the planning approval, right?
Yes.
On the
Yes,
PUD.
on the PUD.
Okay, so your motion is for the PUD? Okay, findings of facts? All of them, okay.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Did you only move on item A?
PUD was A. Planning
Planning approval, B. It's recommended for approval. Is there a motion?
So moved.
They're finding of facts on it as well.
Not on the planning approval. There is?
Right here.
Read that, so I can't make any recommendations.
Just do them all.
Findings of facts, A, B, and C.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? In favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Other business?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we would simply like to bring to the Commission's attention that on your next agenda, you will have a planning approval for an above-ground storage tank. This will be the first request of this type since the zoning ordinance was amended in 2016. This requires additional notification, legal ad, and within a farther radius from the site from a typical planning approval. It is for a tank, a replacement tank in like size in the same location, but it is on your agenda for the September 19th meeting.
Will we be voting on it at that time, or? Okay.
Yes.
Doug, what was the issue the last time we went through all the ordinance changes and we had the commission that was formed? There was an application that came, and I was trying to remember.
There were numerous issues that were discussed and brought to the committee by the opposing group, I say the environmental group, that kind of led the, not opposition, but led the neighborhood discussion, I guess, in one of the, and there were numerous factors: safety, drainage, runoff, traffic, just you name it. Every issue was discussed by the committee, and the ordinance, we ended up probably about a 5-page ordinance, if I remember correctly. But one thing that I think Ms. Rich might have mentioned it, but the neighbors did too, they wanted better notice to the neighborhoods, surrounding areas. So we, for this type of application, that ordinance, I think, is up to a mile surrounding property. Margaret? 1,500 feet, instead of 300 feet. We publish it in the newspaper for 3 consecutive weeks.
2 weeks of publication in the newspaper. In addition, it is posted on the city's main webpage, and it's posted on the city's main webpage, and the entire application is posted, so everyone can see everything that's been submitted.
And this is a replacement of a current tank, so it's not adding a new tank.
It's a replacement tank, but the tank that is replacing was removed prior to the amendment in 2016. It was removed around 2012.
Okay.
If it had been in existence since the amendment, we would not have the planning approval
that makes sense.
application.
Okay.
Is this a PUD amendment too, or just a planning approval? Okay. And I can't, since it's been 3 years, I can't remember all the other issues that we added to the ordinance as far as, don't they have to provide some engineering, did they have to provide a third-party engineering report, or am I mistaken? I know that was discussed.
Enhanced scrutiny area.
Okay.
Falls outside.
Okay, so
Yeah.
your staff report that you will receive will discuss all those issues, I'm sure.
Well, I'm also remembering an issue with a particular application that was submitted, and then there was a change in what was going in this particular tank after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
So far, that's not
Okay.
Is there any other business? Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Carlos.